Izzy Morin, and I'm an undergraduate student in the Sustainability and Contemporary Studies departments at Dalhousie University and University of King's College. I'm also a cluster student at Situating Science. This is the 5th episode in a series of podcasts complementing the Hype in Science event, which happened at the University of King's College on December 7th. Hype in Science, or How Can Respectable Journals Publish Such Crap, will take the shape of 6 case studies of overselling, misrepresentation, or biasing in the presentation of scientific research. Voices from Harvard, UBC, Elsevier, and Dalhousie will be presenting case studies from their own fields, and fueling discussion by casting a critical eye towards the peer review process. The process of the rise of a paper to celebrity status will also be under scrutiny. Is the search for breakthrough papers verging on fetishism? And how will trustworthiness in research be ensured in the context of the current collapse of the peer review system? Today we're chatting with Dr. Sarah Richardson, who is an assistant professor of the history of science and studies of women, gender, and sexuality at Harvard University. Her research focuses are the social dimensions of scientific knowledge and race and gender in the biosciences. She also has a keen interest in the history of a broad range of sciences. Dr. Richardson's talk, titled Race and IQ in the Post-Genomic Age, raised the questions of what defines the scientific community and who are the experts really. Is there a tangible reward for conceptual and methodological debate? These questions come forward in the context of the abandonment of the traditional notion that scientific fields are static and atomized from each other. Dr. Richardson used current evolutionary genomic research and their potential for political and ethical repercussions to explore these themes. So, Dr. Richardson, in your talk today, you mentioned that you think that more meta-scientific conversations are needed in order to address methodological shortcomings in a given field. How can we be more inclusive towards a more demographically diverse body in meta-scientific conversations, especially in the context of information that can be easily misconstrued by laypersons, such as race and IQ?
Well, first let me say what I mean by meta-scientific. It's important for scientific fields to be able to produce trustworthy, objective knowledge. And in order to do so, they need to produce a shared understanding of the standards for making empirical claims in that field. And very often, science today, moving as quickly as it does and operating in such a transdisciplinary environment, has a hard time sharing and producing those standards. So meta-scientific discussion would ask questions like, what knowledge should be produced in this field? What questions should be asked? What are the standards for empirical evaluation of claims in this field? Now, you mentioned the idea of having more diverse voices included in that process. Since our goal is objectivity, the best thing we can do is expose our ideas to as many diverse perspectives as possible. That might mean things like racial and ethnic and age diversity, but also diversity in terms of scientific specialty and background. And each field needs to submit its claims to as wide a range of perspectives as possible.
Could you comment on the current correlations in the studies of race and IQ and what the current suggested correlations imply on a more mainstream social scale?
So the notion that there are IQ differences between different racial and ethnically defined populations has long been a highly politicized area of scientific research. There has never been identified a biochemical factor or biomarker of intellectual differences between different groups. This field is plagued by problems with the credibility of IQ tests, which have not been shown to be culturally independent. These results are often taken up by racist and racialist kinds of claims, which can harm whole groups of people and stigmatize them in terms of our perceptions of their potential for productive work and learning. So this is an area of science, perhaps more than any other, that is very charged and should be subject to our keenest ethical interrogation. Recently, new research in the brain sciences and genomics and the evolutionary sciences has converged to produce some candidate genes for variation between racial ancestry, traditionally defined, and cognitive ability. These claims are highly problematic and have all the same problems as previous research. However, they're operating with the imprint of the contemporary molecular sciences and in an environment where we don't have a strong enough conversation about the meaning and importance of this research and its contextual implications and the methods we need to do it well. And so that was part of the point of my talk.
So for any listeners that don't know the subtleties between racism and racialism, could you just quickly say what the differences are between the two?
Conceptually, racism refers to the view that there are differences between the races and that they are hierarchical differences, that there are evaluative differences between the races. Races are ranked, or some are better than others at different things, and this corresponds with ideological and historically entrenched ideas about the capacities and qualities and characteristics of different populations, which are highly socially conditioned and come from a painful racial past. Racialism is the view that there are differences between the races. It is detached sometimes from the view that those differences are evaluative and ranked. Racialism suggests that races are real, that there might be reasons in certain cases to refer to races as an objective reality in society. And racialism does not necessarily, it usefully distinguishes between racism and the practice of naming and conceptualizing races in other spheres.
There's an idea that a smaller brain equals a lower IQ. In your opinion, are there any safeguards that can be taken against socially destructive so-called causations and the generalizations which fuel them?
Well, we can't prevent people from making claims, but we can provide a lot of good historical context for understanding these claims. For 2 centuries now, scientists have searched in the cranium, in the brain, for a correlation between size and intellectual capability, and they have found no such correlation. But broadly we might say that we, that is, Western scientists and academics, exist within a tradition that has historically valued the finding of differences between human populations. And when you're working in a literature, it's hard to break out of that. It's important that as consumers of scientific knowledge, we are critical of the construct of differences and pay attention to the variation within each group and the overlap between groups. We should always approach new scientific knowledge as suggestive data awaiting a full explanation. We should be humble with respect to the research and note that the data does not speak for itself. It's always happening within a larger context. And so I think that's a healthy way to approach these kinds of claims about human difference in an era where science is moving very quickly, and we often don't know what the genes under investigation really do.
So thank you for talking with us today, Dr. Richardson, and thank you to the listeners for tuning in. For more information on Situating Science and the Hyphen Science event, visit our website at situsci.ca. That's situsci.ca.